Texas Senator Brandon Creighton, author of Senate Bill 2, Texas Education Freedom Act, addresses the Senate Committee on Education K-16 on January 28, 2025. Listen as he lays out the details and provides insight on the bill.
Thank you, Vice Chair Campbell and members. Today I'm laying out Senate Bill 2, the Texas Education Freedom Act. This legislation, it feels familiar, and it should. The Senate passed this legislation 4 times in 2023, but here we are again, and I appreciate your focus and attention because the students of Texas deserve it. Senate Bill 2 finally brings Texas in line with 32 other states, both with Republican and Democrat governors and Republican and Democrat legislatures in those states, offering expanded education freedom to our students and our families. I often say the future of Texas beyond the dinner table with family and faith and conversation and instruction from parents first. The future of Texas begins beyond that in the classroom. And that remains true. If we're being honest with ourselves as elected officials and our constituents, we know that a one-size-fits-all education does not work for many of our students in Texas. Too many families find themselves trapped by their zip code or have a special need that would otherwise allow them in a different educational setting to thrive and advance. Because at the end of the day, many of our Texas students need options and variations on their learning environment, options that suit their needs the most. And we see that day in and day out now with the current options that are available in Texas. As we all know, that we have, many times it's been said, we have many choices now. Senate Bill 2 will serve more students this time around with more funding than ever, allowing nearly 100,000 students to receive an education savings account that would be larger than any other state's school choice program in the first year of operation. So, for instance, we would be 25 and 28 years behind Florida and Arizona, respectively, in their school choice options, where they valued their students at the top of the priority list for the available resources that could be given to them, and we haven't. Senate Bill 2 builds upon the last version of this legislation from the 88th Legislature special sessions that we all supported. Well, many members on this dais supported, some did not, right? Want to be fair about that. As a result, the key provisions that we've worked on, like our anti-fraud provision safeguards, mandatory criminal history checks for any vendors, rigorous reporting requirements, and robust data protections, they're retained or expanded. And we'll explain a little bit more about what that exactly means. Just as prior iterations of this legislation, parents can direct their students' approved funds to pre-approved providers, but never have direct possession of the dollars themselves, and no reimbursements are permitted. That is why you can call it a voucher, and I understand the nomenclature is easy and it rolls off the tongue, but it's not a voucher. It's an education savings account that's not just political terminology designed to sound better or different. It's not a voucher. The reason why Florida has a voucher and an education savings account, the reason why Florida has both is because they're different. Otherwise, they wouldn't have both, right? So Senate Bill 2 is fully universal. So there's $200 million appropriated in Senate Bill 2 for a fully universal population in and of itself. A fully universal on eligibility population in and of itself. And then beyond that $200 million universal population, which in and of itself would be close to the largest launch in American history for a school choice plan, beyond that, there's another $800 million for special needs and free and reduced lunch eligible certain poverty level threshold kids that need help. And they are the priority set at the top of the weighted funds available within the framework, as it should be. If the number of applicants do not exceed the available revenue, then everyone is approved, because we have a certain framework and we're expecting a certain amount of demand, but we're not sure about that. We don't know that the number of moms and dads that we expect to need and want these choices on behalf of their students will apply. And we've got a great framework set up through the comptroller with funding to not only promote the program to families so they'll know that it exists, but we've got an incredible framework to support those families once and if they're approved. The approval would be by a lottery pick, because again, we're not the federal government, right? We don't print another $1 trillion every time we have a problem, right? So there will be some today that think the program should be larger. I think we're going to have a witness that says that today that all 6 million students in Texas should receive a $10,000 ESA immediately. That's a $53 billion funding effort for 1 year. And the capacity and the operational logistics to even fathom that would be impossible to carry out. So, but there will be testimony today for such a thing. We work within scarce dollars. And speaking of that, the funds for the education savings account, they don't come from public education. In fact, we have a separate bill with an incredible historic lift for public education that, just like last session, for 90% of the regular session in the Senate, had no connection whatsoever to the school choice effort or the teacher pay effort. Many of you haven't heard that one, I'm assuming. So we're being consistent in keeping those subjects separate, and our efforts to lift up public schools and public school teachers, especially with my Teacher Bill of Rights that last session the House killed, but other states modeled it all across the country, and it was graded as a bipartisan bill by many organizations. But I guess for some reason, it wasn't a priority. It will be this time around for us. If applications don't exceed available revenue, all are admitted. If applications are beyond available revenue and beyond 100,000 in number, then we will go immediately to a priority set. And that priority set is weighted for 80% of the funds in the school choice ESA Education Freedom Program to be allocated to special needs, students with disabilities, and a certain threshold within the poverty level itself, so that the most vulnerable Texans will have these opportunities way before anyone else. And with such a gigantic percentage of priority within the whole program, that it will be very clear where the Texas legislature stands on who we're really working the hardest to help here and serve here among the most vulnerable Texans. The students accepted into the ESA program will initially receive a minimum of $2,000. So think of our homeschool eligibility, right? And that would be for a homeschool family capped at that point at this time. We're listening to the homeschool families that will be coming up today, and they will be, as well as statewide organizations, and we will be listening to their preferences about that policy. But that number is 100% higher than the number that was passed in the last iteration of this bill. It was $1,000 at that time, and it was fully supported by the statewide homeschool organization groups, mainly talking about the fact that they don't as much have tuition costs, but they have curriculum curriculum and tutoring costs. I talk with my hands, I'm going to hit this mic again. So curriculum and tutoring, sometimes transportation to tutoring, those would be examples of the limits of what that ESA might provide. Beyond that, if families choose to enroll their student in an accredited private school, they would receive $10,000 for the education savings account. And if that student has a disability, that student would receive, and this is coming from a public school, they would receive $11,500 if that child has a disability designation. Parents can spend these funds on an example of a different set of menu items. And again, this money doesn't go to the parents like a voucher. So you can't go to Rooms to Go and buy furniture if you have $1,000 left over, right? This is an education savings account with the strongest anti-fraud provisions in the country. The money would be directed from the framework at the comptroller's office, right? The comptroller is our money man for the state of Texas, not through TEA. And then that money would be directed to the providers that were already approved. And then whether it be a homeschool family choosing their own curriculum and then customizing that curriculum afterwards, that'd be fine. Or if it would be a private school effort for a student going from public to private, and if there's a delta or a difference or a gap on the tuition for that private school, it's still a $10,000 number for most of these ESAs. And through private philanthropy or scholarships within that school or the community, they would need to find a way to fill that difference, as is the case today. Parents can spend these funds again on tuition, instructional materials, higher education courses, trade certificates, assessment costs, different therapies, tutoring, and transportation as examples. Just as in SB1 that we passed prior in the special, the participants are required to take a norm reference test annually. Most private schools offer that already. There is no imposition of the STAR test on private schools. There are no strings passed along to homeschool families or private schools through this testing effort. So you look at many private schools offer the Iowa test today. Public schools offer norm reference tests to seniors in high school. They're called the SAT and the ACT. So these norm reference tests are in public and private and in the homeschool world. That's the legislation as it calls out for those tests to be administered for those that hold the ESA. Previously, we had a hold harmless provision for small public schools in the bill. We passed that a couple of times. Members weren't really fired up about that provision. The bill still passed with it in it. The public school stakeholders all around the state, including in our public hearings, rejected those provisions and said, among many other things, we don't care about that. And the House, through those signals, rejected that policy several times over. So we pulled that provision out of the bill. There's not another school choice plan in the country that offers a hold harmless provision. So in other words, if a child or a student leaves a public school with an ESA to go to the private school, the public school would receive money for that child either way. That provision was rejected last time around by many public school and teacher organizations and stakeholders. So it's gone. Senate Bill 2 removes that provision and keeps the program straightforward and focused on empowering families. It's our first of many bills, again, to unleash this session to bolster the potential of Texas education and to bolster the potential of our students and our schools. And that includes our public schools as well. Many of you watched the Finance Committee meetings yesterday, looking at the commitment of over $96 billion for public education, funding current fund formulas, enrollment growth, and an additional nearly $5 billion for public education as new money that there are 3, 4, 5 states in America, maybe more, that don't even have a total state budget of the new money that we are allocating towards public schools. Not old money, new money. We did that last session as well, though, and that was also rejected by superintendent organizations, teacher organizations, and many public school stakeholders. That testimony was that it was okay to kill all that new money for teachers and public schools if they had an opportunity to get rid of 40,000 education savings accounts for special needs kids. That's very confusing testimony for us as we listen and we try to work out solutions for the future of the state. And yes, that's true. By investing in our teachers and our parents, we give future generations the greatest chance at keeping this Texas economic engine alive, which after the 08 and 09 subprime crash saved America. This economic engine. But if we don't make changes fast, and it might not be in your school district, and we all love our school districts. I don't hear anyone say anything different. The narratives you get through some of your emails definitely says something different. But we show that through our actions, and the political process is brutal. 31 million Texans, y'all have fortitude, backbone, experience, a never quit attitude, and an absolute strong opinion. I'm proud of you for that. I'm proud of us for that. But in this building, it's tough sometimes to land the plane. And we're determined that our Texas students deserve it this time around. Thank you for your consideration, members. I know that was an extended layout, but I wanted to cover some of the problems that have been buzzing around through narratives that don't have anything to do with the actual policy of the bill. And it's important with our media watching that we have those types of clarifications covered. You know, and I'll finish with this and open up to questions. It's fascinating to me that last year in 2023, not last year, we had a public hearing on school choice, and we had almost every public school stakeholder in the state of Texas in overflow rooms waiting to testify against. And that's okay. It's everyone's right to testify as they see fit in their heart. In Washington, D.C., you can no longer, as a private citizen, testify on a bill unless you're invited. That is tragic. So we make sure everyone has their say, but we've got to keep decorum and make sure we're respectful and keep your cool if you don't hear what you like, right? Don't even think of us in that situation. Think of everyone else waiting to testify next. We have to give everybody the same amount of time. But with that testimony that we had last session, it was very clear that with all of these different opinions, we have incredible misunderstandings within the bill that I think some of you might have questions about today. And so I'm going to open up the commentary among our senators to help exactly with that, to make sure the audience and those watching in the media can cover it. When we had those hearings last in 2023 on the ESA, all those education groups and the media showed up. A few months later, when we had a hearing on public school student outcomes, how are our students doing? What can we do to do better for public school students? Not one. I don't mean to say only 3. Not one camera, not one public school superintendent organization, not one teacher organization showed up at the hearing. Not one. When we have a hearing on student outcomes soon, please come. That's important. Okay, members, Senator Campbell.
Thank you.